If you want to learn cascading dropdown using MVC, you are at the right video. My name is Progin and welcome to .NET Mastery. If you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you are notified whenever I publish a new video. Without wasting our time, let me show you the application that we will build. Here we have two dropdowns. We have category, where once a user selects a category, the product dropdown will be populated. So if I select main course, I have the product that have category main course. Dessert, we will have the corresponding product. It will be a quick video, and let me get started with programming from the next video. Let me create a project here, and we will have to select the MVC template. I have that here. I will call that Cascading MVC Demo. Let me create that. I will use the .NET 8 here, and authentication, I will use individual accounts. That way we will get Entity Framework Core already configured for our project. With that, let me hit the Create button and wait for that. Perfect. Project has been created, and we should have the areas with identity. If we examine the data folder, we have the application DB context here. Now we want to create category table and the product table. We will have to create them in the models folder. Right click, add a class for category, and we will have product. Inside product, we will create 3 columns. ID will be the primary key. We will have name and price. We need to create a mapping table for category, and we need the foreign key relation. So let me create category ID, and we will have a navigation property for category, where we can define that category ID is a foreign key for this category table. Even if you do not define that, it will automatically do that because the name here is category ID, which is basically the model name followed by an ID here. Next, we need the category. There we will create int ID, which will be primary key, and string, let me call that category name. We can use the required data annotation for category name as well as where we have the name here. Perfect, that looks good. With that in place, let me go and add them to our DB set. We have that right here. So we will have to create a DB set for category and the table name that we want to give in the database. Let me call that categories. I will do the same. For product, we will have a DB set on product. Call that as products. Perfect. We save that. And then if we examine the app-settings.json file, it already added a connection string. Let me make the database name a little simpler. ASP.NET-Cascading MVC Demo. Let me see if the server name I am able to connect from SQL Server. Let me try to connect here. And if we paste the local DB MS SQL local DB, I am able to connect there. So that looks good. With that, all we have to do is add a migration. I will call that add category and product. And with that, it should create both category and product table. Let me do update database here. And let's see. Categories, it is creating the ID. Products, perfect, it has that. And we have the primary key and foreign key relation. Migration is complete here. If I refresh the database, perfect. We have the ASP.NET Cascading MVC Demo, and there we will have the identity tables along with categories and products. Perfect. Let me continue from the next video. Now on the tables here, what we can do is scaffold the CRUD operation. So in the controller here, right click, add a controller, And we will select MVC controller with views using entity framework. For the model here, let me select category, DB context. We already have that application DB context. We want to create views. Name is categories controller. Let me modify that to be category controller and scaffold that. That will basically create all the views for CRUD operation on category. Perfect, it is all done. You can see it is using application DB context and we have all the pages here. That looks good. Let me pin this here. In the views, we have category and we have all the CRUD views. That looks good. Let me scaffold the product as well. Controller with entity framework. Model class will be product this time. And let me add that. Whoops. I think the controller name, I forgot to check that. I want product controller and not products controller. It is products controller. Let me modify that to be product. I like to be consistent and rename that. Great. Now all we have to do is in shared _ layout. Let me add the link to both of them. Controller will be category, action will be index, and this will be category. Copy that li, paste it one more time for product. Perfect. Let me run the application and see if that works. Great. Let me go to category here. Perfect. Create new. Give that a name test here. And that is working. Delete and all the functionalities should be functional. Let me try to create a category, appetizer, and main course. Let me also create dessert here. Perfect. Now if I go to product, well, we have an error and I know why. When we rename the controller, the folder name, we have to rename that manually. With that, let me run it again. And perfect, that works. If it does not work, make sure to clean the solution and rebuild the solution. Now when we create a new product, perfect. You can see it automatically displays category ID in the dropdown and all of the scaffolding is automatically done by the .NET team. Let me create the appetizer, and when we hit the create button, for some reason it is not working. Let me add a post here. Create. Let me examine the model state. That is not valid, and I believe it is because of the category. Yep, the category navigation property. We will have to make sure that we do not validate that category. For that, let me open the product model and I will say validate never. Run the application again and the CRUD functionalities should work now. Create new, spring roll, appetizer, create that. Let me press F10, that works. Remove the debugging point and perfect. I will create few more products here for appetizer, main course and dessert. Next, what we want to do is on the home page, we want to implement a dropdown for category. Once a user selects any category, we want to populate another dropdown with all the product. That is how cascading dropdowns work. Let me get started with that from the next video. We need to populate dropdown on the home page, but for that we need to load all the categories when we are using the cascading dropdown in the controller action. That way we can load that in the dropdown here. Let me open the home controller for that, and we will have to add application DB context using dependency injection. Perfect. Then we have to work on the index action method right here. We need to get all the categories. So let me do that. Variable categories is equal to _ context dot categories dot to list. Let me execute and populate that right now. Then we need a list of all the products, but right now that product list will depend on which category is selected. So rather than populating that, we can do products is equal to new, and this will be a list of product. Then on categories and product, we will add one more entry there with the ID of 0, and category name will be select category, product name will be select product. Now we have to pass both of the list here to our view. We can do that using view bag. Typically I am not a fan of view bag. I would rather create a view model, but for the simplicity of the course, I am using view bag here. And let me call that products is equal to new, and the list here we have to populate that in a dropdown. So we have to convert that to a select list or a select list item. When we create a select list here, we will have to pass the products, and then what will be the value. So ID we will get it there, and the data field we can get that from name. That looks good for the product dropdown. I will have to populate the category dropdown. Let me call that categories. And we have that in the categories. Name is different. It is not name. That is category name. With that configured, when we return back to the view, right click, go to that view. Here we can display the dropdown. Let me do that inside the div here. I will create a div with the class of text center and give it a heading of Cascading Dropdown Demo. Inside there, let me create a div with the class of row and form group, and there we will add a div, give it a class of column 2. I will copy and paste that 3 more times. After 2, let me give it 4, 2 and 4. Perfect. Here we want to display a label, and I can say category ID. For the next column too, let me display product. We don't want the ID here. That looks good. If I save that and go back to the view, we have an error there. We did not save the home controller. Let me do that. And we will have to restart. Perfect. We see category and we see the product. Let me add some spacing there after H2. Let me add padding top of 4 and border. Also, I will give margin 2. Let's see. Great. Now padding top. Let me make it padding 4. Perfect. That looks good. And then finally, we need to display the dropdown here. Let me do that in the next video. Now we need to display the dropdown for category and product. If I go back here, from the home controller we are not passing anything to the view, but in the index here at the top, let me add a model, which will be the product class. The reason I am adding product class is there we have the product ID and we have the category ID. We will use that in tag helpers right here. So for the first dropdown, it will be a select tag with ASP4. That will be the category ID. Let me add that. Class name will be form select for the dropdown, and let me give that an ID of category ID. After that, we need the dropdown items, which is ASP items. That we have in a view bag. Right here, we can go view bag dot. We need the name, that is categories. Copy and paste that here. With that configured, let me close the select tag, and we will have to explicitly add the closing tag. If I save that and go back, perfect. You can see it is populated, but we have a select category. For that we have two options. Right here in the select itself, we can create dynamically an option like select category, and that way it will be populated. With that, we no longer require this field. Let me comment both of them out here. And if we examine that, great, that looks good. Now after the category has been selected, we need to trigger an event that will give us all the product based on that category. For that, we will go back to the controller here, and I will add that right here, public, and that will return JSON. So we will say JSON result, get product by category ID here, integer we will receive, let me call that category ID here. Based on that, we want to return JSON, and there what we want to do is using our context, we want to go to product.where u goes to u.category ID is equal to the category ID, retrieve that, and we will pass that back, convert that to a list right here. Now we need to call this endpoint whenever we select any category from the dropdown. That way we will get the product detail. For that, I will go to index here, and we will have to add some JavaScript. So let me add a section here for scripts. And inside there, I will have a script tag for our JavaScript. We will add $document.ready, and there we will call a function getProductID by category. So whenever the page is loaded, we will try to retrieve that. On top of that, we will have to call this method whenever a category ID is selected. So whenever the ID of category ID is toggled, we need to invoke this method again. Now where is that method? Do not worry right now. We will add that very soon. But right now, whenever a field with the ID of category ID is changed, we want to call this function. Let me copy that and let me create that now. Variable getProduct by category ID will be a function here, and in there we need an AJAX call to this endpoint. So we will say $AJAX here, and there we need to define the URL. We can use the razor syntax here, so @ we can say URL dot action, and what action method do we want to invoke? If we go back here, that is getProduct by category ID, and what is the controller name? That is the home controller. Then we have the type here. Right now it is a get action, but you can change that if you want. When we are calling that, do we have to pass any data? Yes, we do. We have to pass the category ID there. Category ID, we can retrieve that using #categoryID.value. That is the ID we have given to our category dropdown. Finally, what we want to do is, if everything is successful here, we want a function where we will receive the JSON response back, and we will iterate and populate the product dropdown. Before I populate the product dropdown, let me create that dropdown here. ASP4 will be ID. Because we are in the product model, this will be product ID. Class name again will be form select, and we will give it an ID of product ID. That looks good. Now if I save it right now, and if I go back, we will have an empty dropdown. We need to populate that. We have all the result in the data here. We are passing that as JSON. So we can iterate through that. So we will say $on data. For each record in there, we will have another function. Basically, it's JavaScript. So we will call index and item. It will iterate through all the product here. And this is a built-in JavaScript function. Index will give us the index like 0, 1, 2, 3, and item will have the product. Where we want to append the product, it is inside product ID. So let me get that $. We will say pound product ID dot append, and there we want to create an option with the value of item.id. make sure you are careful with the single quotes here. We will close that option. And then for the name, that will be inside item.name, I believe. Let me double check. Yep, it will be item.name plus we need the closing option tag. Perfect, that looks good. With that configured, let me save and go back. We select appetizer and nothing happens. Let me open the console window and we have a syntax error. Let me see that. And of course, I forgot a plus sign there. With that, let me go back. And if I select category, great. We have spring roll, main course. Well, in main course, you see the spring roll and hash brown stays, but it adds the new option. What we have to do is we need to remove the existing option here. So on success here, we will find the product ID and remove all the existing option. We go here, perfect, we see that, appetizer, main course, and perfect. With that, you can see Cascading Dropdown in action. Main thing here is working with JavaScript can be a little tricky, but we need to call the AJAX to retrieve product based on the category ID. Now if you had 3 cascading dropdown, you can continue this on with more AJAX call, and that way you can have category, subcategory, and then the product. You can take that on as an assignment, but this looks good for our demo project. I hope you enjoyed the video, and for more free content in the .NET world, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. With that, happy coding, and I will see you guys in some other video.